Hi, I'd like to share a recipe I've been working on for Dutch baby pancakes. And this really is the result of my COVID spring and summer and wanting to make something for breakfast that was interesting, that I liked, and it was reasonably healthy. You might think, wait a minute, pancakes, that doesn't sound healthy, but I ended up with a recipe that uses for one large pancake, which is enough for one person, plenty for one person, uses 2 eggs, half cup of flour, so 2 eggs, that's a reasonable thing to eat for breakfast, half cup of flour, not too much carbohydrate in my view, and flour I use is about 20% protein. So, and just tiny bit of sugar and some other ingredients. And so I went to look at recipes I'd tried before and remembered one in particular from a very well-known New York Times food writer. And I tried it, and it seemed different. I didn't quite remember it, but it didn't come out well. I was looking for a sort of pancake that was puffy, that had big bubbles in it, a little bit chewy, and not tough, but big air bubbles, and more like a really maybe like a puffy great pizza crust, but softer, of course. And this one came out kind of foamy, little tiny bubbles, texture more like, I don't know, foam rubber, or maybe one of those, the type of omelet I don't like, which people whip up and comes out kind of a tiny little bubbles. So I couldn't figure out what was wrong, but the new recipe used a blender, and I think what happened is her editors got a hold of her and said, hey, we got to make this simpler. Let's just dump everything in a blender and hit the button and don't go through anything complicated. And you end up with this foamy pancake with a rubbery texture I don't like. So, I soon dumped that recipe, or at least using the blender part. I looked at a lot of recipes, I tried many, and all the ones that used the blender came out with the wrong texture. I was really looking for that sort of light, airy, big bubbles, a little bit stretchy, still tender, but the kind of big bubbles that you see in, well-made bread or artisanal bread. But those take days to make, and I needed this to be fast and easy and not using a leavening like baking powder. And I pretty soon stopped using any recipes and just started experimenting. I'm a science teacher, that's what I do. So I started trying this, trying that, trying little things. And I started studying the food science. And the food science revealed something pretty surprising. One of the things was that the milk had to be very hot, not boiling but warm. Another thing was to leave out butter and shortening from the initial mix of the flour, and there a bunch of, and it's sort of the sequence of how you mix the ingredients actually affected the outcome, which is something I never really expected. I made several a week since beginning of April, and I think I've made about 75. And I think I have it now, at least my version that I like. And the really good news is it's actually pretty simple. And I'll share that with you. I think another big question right away is what size pan or what kind of pan. And I definitely like using cast iron. This one is 9.5 inches. It's larger than my preferred size. I also experimented with other things because not everyone has cast iron, and I found that glass pie pans worked really well, which surprised me, but they sure did. This is a deep dish Pyrex one, and I don't think it has to be deep dish. I had some success, but not as good with metal pie tins, but you could try it. Something I didn't try, but I think would work, would be a heat-proof metal skillet, quality metal skillet, as long as it can go into the oven. But this is actually a saute pan, and I don't think it would work. It has straight sides, or work as well. I think you want to look for a pan that's usually called a skillet as opposed to a saute pan, and has flared or angled sides so that you get that rise. And the rise is the fun of this, I think. So I really like using the smaller, my smaller cast iron. This is 8 inches, which I measured across the top. So it's, you know, a little smaller at the bottom, but this is 8 inches across the top. And what happens here is you get a really tall, fun rise, you know, around the outside, which I think is fun. I think part of the making a Dutch baby is the fun, but it also browns up kind of, I think due to the Maillard reaction, and gets kind of a nice toasty flavor. So this was my favorite at 8-inch diameter. I think you could go down to 7. I think you could probably go up to about 9.5. What is really important is to preheat the oven. And I found using oven temp of 425 degrees, but it's not the oven that cooks the pizza, right? It's the pan. The heat comes from the pan. So this has to be preheated as well. And I found that even after my oven, the air temp in the oven was at 425, it needed at least 5 more minutes for the pan to come up to temp. And so we're going to let this preheat to 425. And we'll go make the batter and then come back and cook the Dutch baby pancake. All right, while the oven and the pan is preheating at 425, let's create the batter for a Dutch baby pancake, and I'm just going to be making one. You can always double or increase the recipe, multiply the recipe. One of the most critical things is the flour to liquid ratio. So pouring it, or rather measuring it, both of those things is very important. So we're going to use a 1/2 cup of milk. And you do want some fat, so 2% or whole. And I like to hold it at eye level and really make sure that I got the right amount. You'd be surprised how different looking at eye level and not at eye level makes. And we'll put that into a saucepan. And we're going to heat that up. We're going to scald it really to below boiling, but over 160, which is, I guess, a good definition for scald. It needs to be hot. If you don't have a thermometer, I think we'll use my thermometer, cooking thermometer, which didn't turn on. There we go. There. So that'll be ready for us in a moment. And there's nothing else in here except the milk. So next we want to be careful about our flour measurements. And flour can be, of course, weighed or volume, and there's lots of discussion about that. The way I'm going to show you really works well to be consistent, maybe even more consistent than using a scale, because what the people that insist on weighing flour don't realize is how humid the flour is affects its volume and amount of flour as well. But we're going to use what's called spooning. And so spooning, you simply fill whatever measurement thing you want by kind of dropping it in loosely into whatever measurement. We're going to be using 1/2 cup, and then take a straight edge. I'm going to use the back of the spoon and just, without pushing it down, and notice I didn't scoop it in, I didn't compact the flour in any way, and that's going to go into my mixing bowl. And even though there's other ingredients eventually getting in here, we're only putting in the salt right now. And this is to help create the kind of texture that I'm looking for in the Dutch baby I like. So here's 1/8 teaspoon of salt. You could use more. This is kosher salt. If you do use sea salt or not flake salt like kosher salt, you might want to use even less. Again, this is just for a 1/2 cup of flour to make one large Dutch baby. So that's getting ready there. Sometimes I mix that up to the salt evenly distributed. Sometimes I don't. And I don't think the milk's quite hot yet. So I want to talk about what might go on or even in a Dutch baby. I think that if you cook it plain, it's going to really rise the most, and that's fine. And you can always add toppings to it after it's cooked. Sometimes I just eat them like a pancake with maple syrup and butter. But other things are great too. Certainly seasonal fruits, berries, blueberries, apples, plums, peaches. I even tried banana pecan butter once. But there's one really big caveat here, and that is that you really need to warm whatever you put in the center of the pancake before you cook it. If you don't, for instance, cold fruit, you'll get pockets of really raw batter. So here I've got some blueberries. I simply rinse them, and I'm going to put them in my saucepan here. And I warmed it a bit, and I'm going to put just a tiny bit of sugar with them, not too much, maybe a teaspoon. And let them warm up. Kind of par cooking them, not much more than just making sure they're warm. And I'll put that back there, and I'm going to cover that, let that go. Let's see how our milk is coming along. And it's 165, so it is ready. So I'll turn that off. And this is a very important step. The warm milk makes a very big difference in helping the flour do its thing. And so does the salt. So I'm just going to not be too fancy and just pour it all in at once. And kind of mix it by scraping the sides down. And then giving it a stir. And I'm going to do this for at least a full minute. And it's going to change over that minute. What's happening is the proteins in the wheat are linking up and forming longer, stretchier protein, a healthy natural protein for most of us that we call gluten, which is what naturally forms in wet and especially warm flour and water. And the other ingredients impede that. So that's why there's no sugar in here, there's no extract or butter. In particular, shortening gets its name because it keeps doughs crumbly, and it keeps these longer, stretchier flour components from forming. So you don't get a stretchy dough. And I'm looking for a stretchy dough that captures big air bubbles and is a little bit chewy. So you can see it's a little bit glossy now, and it's still warm. So I'm going to let it cool for at least 3 minutes. So I'll start this little timer because I'm going to be adding eggs soon, and I don't want to cook those eggs in warm batter. So we got to give that 3 minutes. In the meantime, we can check to see how our berries are doing. They're getting, I think, coming along. We're going to let them heat up a little bit more. And we'll let the timer run. Other things you could put into or on the Dutch baby are savory things like onions, bell peppers, tomatoes, kale, spinach, sausage, prosciutto. I don't know, the list goes on. But again, you want to either warm or par cook any of them. Otherwise, it won't come out very well. All right, that's 3 minutes. And the batter has cooled quite a bit. I think you can see that it's actually probably a little bit more holding itself together. It's a little bit stretchier and ready to go on to the next step. So what we'll do here is add the rest of the ingredients. I'm going to be using a small amount of vanilla extract. I just put in an 1/8 of a teaspoon. Obviously you could put more if you want more vanilla, but for this single pancake I think an 1/8 of a teaspoon of this particular vanilla. They're all kind of different in terms of strength. This I think is plenty for this single strength vanilla. And we are going to add a little sugar. Most recipes I found have a lot more sugar than I'm using. I find that just 2 teaspoons is enough, at least for this volume of a single pancake with a 1/2 cup of flour. And we can now add the eggs. And it's 2 eggs to 1/2 cup of flour. Trying to get all the white in there that I can. And I'm going to use a whisk at this point to really to mix things up. And it doesn't, probably just a minute or so. You just want to get rid of all the streaks of egg yolk. And one other important thing, we're introducing air that'll get trapped. And air is the only leavening agent in this Dutch baby. So you want to get air into the pancake. It'll get trapped in the matrix of the egg white. And you can let this batter sit and use it a little later, but it's really important if you let it sit really for more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes to whisk it again to get those air bubbles inside of it. And I'm going to go over and put it into the pan now. Okay, so the pan, in this case the cast iron skillet, has preheated at 425. I think it's been in there 10 to 15 minutes, so it's good and hot. So let's get the pancake cooking. So here's how we do that. I'm going to open the oven, and we want to remember that every part of this pan is hot. And I'm going to pull it out a little bit. And you could remove it to maybe a heat-safe countertop. I'm just going to butter it right kind of on the shelf by using, holding the butter kind of carefully with a piece of paper towel, and just go around the outside of the pan. I'm going to start at the top edges and work my way down. And all in all, I'm probably putting in less than a tablespoon of butter, maybe more like a teaspoon, but I'm buttering it generously. So that is ready. And next, I'm going to pour in the batter for the Dutch baby. And I'll use my rubber heat-safe scraper, get that in there. And then in this one, I've decided to add some blueberries that I warmed earlier. And I'm going to kind of put those in the middle. And not too much or the Dutch baby won't rise, so I may not use all that I made today. But there's I like to have, I'm very fond of them with fruit. So there we go. There's that. And then, again, every part of this pan is hot. I'm going to put that in the oven. And I'm going to cook it for 15 minutes at 425. That could vary based on your oven or lots of factors, if you've put fruit in it, etc. But 15 minutes seems to be about the average temperature and seems to work in my countertop oven. All right, we'll see you in 15. All right, well there's 15 minutes. Can you see me? Well, not well maybe, but let's take a look at this. And I think we've got it. It's risen pretty nicely. And actually it's, I think it'll lift out just with a fork. Maybe I'll grab it with the towel and slide it onto my plate. There we go. And I'm definitely pretty happy with that. I might serve it for myself right now with a little butter and maple syrup, sweeten it up. Of course, you could make more than one in a large oven at once. Maybe even cut them into wedges and serve a variety of toppings. If you have guests, and they can put their own on, or however you want to do it. But there's my Dutch baby. I'm going to turn off the video and have this for brunch.